Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Caitanya Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastachari Chatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, so we are there in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's quite a remarkable chapter, and we will move on. I'm going to read verse 15, and then we'll go on from there. So, and the point here in this verse 15 is that if we cease material existence as was described in the previous few verses that we read last night, then one will not only achieve peace or freedom from fear and sex life and be able to control his or her senses. Not only that, but in verse 15, Lord Krishna says that thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. Yes. So, in fact, if we look at the Sanskrit, then we see that Lord Krishna says, Matstanam, that you will, this is what the yogi, Ashtanga yogi, or the devotee will achieve. Matstanam means literally my place, my abode. Matstanam, my abode. So, that's very Krishna conscious. And of course, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that the goal of yoga, obviously, particularly for the devotees, but ultimately for the Ashtanga yogis also, the goal is to go to the kingdom of God, the place of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Matstanam, my place. Yes, so Prabhupada discusses this in the purport. Prabhupada discusses this in the purport that kingdom of God is just a very, very amazing place. There's no need for sun, moon, or electricity. That's going to be described a little later. Yes, it's just a truly remarkable place. Incredibly remarkable place, where one associates directly with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in personal relationship. And in this way, it's just the whole experience is really quite incredible. Yes, so anyway, we should go there. The Ashtanga yogis, they may go there if they take to Krishna consciousness nicely. They may go there because through their practice of Ashtanga yoga, they may get some realization of the super soul, and this may lead them to realization of Krishna himself. Yes. So this is the thing. One has to approach the Supreme Lord. Yes. Prabhupada concludes the purport here. One can overcome the path of birth and death only by understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, perfection of the yoga system is the attainment of freedom from material existence, and not some magical jugglery or gymnastic feats to be full, innocent people. So now we move on. Verses 16 and 17, they go together, and the point here, well, it's bringing up more aspects of Ashtanga yoga, different aspects of Ashtanga yoga, and particularly in terms of personal discipline. Anyway, let's read these two verses and you'll see they're actually somewhat famous verses, actually. First of all, that we should be vegetarian. We should not take animal foodstuffs. We shouldn't eat the bodies of dead animals. But then also that if someone eats food which is not offered to Krishna, and of course if one drinks liquor, if one smokes, things like that, then one will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. So therefore, the devotees, they don't prepare food for personal enjoyment, but they prepare it for Krishna. It's done as a service to Krishna, an offering to Krishna. Yes, so Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport here of 16. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Okay, and so on to verse 17, which, like we said, it goes together. The two they are connected to each other. He who is regulated, and she also, who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work, can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system, including Krishna consciousness, devotional service. This materialistic existence Materialistic existence. Wow, what happened? Sure. Anyway, up to today. The one-man show here. What are we? Alright. Let's hope. We'll see. Yeah, so this material existence where people are so pushing so hard for enjoyment and development, Prabhupada compares it to having a fever. Having a fever. In a class on these verses, Prabhupada says, material civilization is like a fever. The temperature should be 98 degrees, that's Fahrenheit. If it falls below 98 degrees or rises above 98 degrees, that is not good. Similarly, our program is not to increase to the death point, neither to decrease to the death point. Yuktahara Vaharasya. We don't say, don't eat. Eat, but don't eat more and don't eat less. That is our program. We don't prohibit anything. So in 17, Prabhupada begins by saying, extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. And again, Srila Prabhupada, he particularly, he spoke that first sentence there about extravagance, but then after that, Srila Prabhupada, to a large extent, focuses again on that we must eat prasadam. Food must be offered. And we mustn't waste time sleeping too much. Prabhupada says his ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridas would not even accept prasadam, nor even sleep for a moment without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names. And then, of course, there's this interesting mention of recreation. Recreation, and it's interesting. Srila Prabhupada makes the point, it's right at the end of the purport. Since there's no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. And because he's regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness and other bodily activities, there's no material misery for him. But yeah, this point, since there's no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. So, I mean, Prabhupada himself, of course, would go for morning walks. That's a very well-known point about Srila Prabhupada and his personal lifestyle. But that wasn't just sort of hanging out and doing some sport and just relaxing and just something like that. That was specifically exercise for maintaining, trying to maintain the condition of the body as much as is possible. But otherwise, we shouldn't waste our time doing things which are useless. This here, let me just read out to you approximately what was the daily schedule of Srila Prabhupada. Listen to this. At 1:30, Srila Prabhupada would wake up and translate books. From 3 to 5, he'd chant japa. And I'm sure he'd take a bath also. I'm not sure exactly when he'd take a bath, but yeah, he did take a bath. So 3 to 5, he'd chant japa. 5:30, he'd go for his morning walk for at least 1 hour, generally, or more than 1 hour. That was not unusual at all. More than 1 hour, 1.5 hours, a few kilometers. 7 o'clock he'd come back for the morning program. Then he'd have breakfast. From 9 till maybe 11:30 or thereabouts, he'd take care of different issues and managerial, organizational matters of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. 11:30 would be a massage, followed by a bath. 1 o'clock would be lunch. 2 o'clock he'd take little rest, not a lot. Then after that he'd have some juice. He would, generally Prabhupada would only eat twice a day. Sometimes he'd take a snack in the evening, but sometimes, not common, not often. After his rest, he'd have some juice. 5 o'clock, meet some guests or give a class or have like a darshan. I went to a few darshans of Prabhupada's in the later afternoon. And between 10 and 11 at night, he would take rest after having a leg massage. This was like basically the program of Srila Prabhupada. And of course, in regards to work, all he was doing, it was all just devotional service to the Lord, to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Yes, so now, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath, Shri Giri Govardhan, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So let's have a look here. Verses 18 and 19 are particularly, well, anyway, 18 and 19. Really from 18 to 23 is a description of the samadhi of that elevated yogi who can be taken as being a devotee, as we've already said many times. Yeah. So let's read through 18 to 23. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Then, let's say, 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Then verses 20 to 23. 20 to 23. They seem to all be merged. They are. They're all merged in together. 20 to 23. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless, transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Okay, so let's go through each verse bit by bit, analyze a little. 18, when the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. So this is just in terms of the terms, the terminology that we read last night. For those two stages in Ashtanga Yoga, Yoga Ruruksha is the earlier stage where one still does some karma yoga, but then at some point in a more well into the Yoga Ruruksha stage, at some point the practitioner gives up the karma yoga and takes up this sort of meditative type of discipline, these different exercises, more like yoga as people have this conception of yoga sitting in different positions and doing breathing exercises and so on. So Zoom seems to be going. Because I switched off the sound so you can't hear what he says, but it seems to be working. I think he'd telephone us if it's not. So now it's working. But can you switch this thing on? So sorry about that, devotees. Just technological challenges. Verse 19. Verse 19. And it's continuing the description of the state of that advanced yogi, or in a certain application, the advanced devotee, when they're in samadhi or on the very high level. 19, as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendental self. And Srila Prabhupada, here's a verse. This is the meditation. This is Srimad Bhagavad. This is not a special question. It's just quoting Srimad Bhagavatam 3:28-32. A yogi should meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which, for those who bow down to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. He should also meditate the yogi, on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency, in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. Okay, so then 20 to 23, we read them together, they're all together. And this is about how the yogi in the perfectional stage feels. Okay. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Yes, so anyway, the purport talks about different types of samadhi, Patanjali's process, and anyway, there are details about Patanjali's process and like that. And as one becomes situated like this, well, Srila Prabhupada makes the point, where is it? Yeah. No. Anyway, it's a lengthy purport, and it's mainly just describing, more than anything, the execution of Ashtanga Yoga, really. We don't really need to go into it in detail. Of course, Prabhupada says in the second to last paragraph, the best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he doesn't aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practice Hatha Yoga, which is a part of Ashtanga Yoga we mentioned last night. Dhyana Yoga, another part. And Jnana Yoga, which is kind of connected or even can be seen as being a part. But there's no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Hare Krishna. Yes, so let's have a look here. Where to go from here? Verses 24 and 25. So they sort of go together. I'll read them both. One should, just a second. It's working. Unstable. Okay. Just a moment. I'm just going to do something here. Hopefully improve the stability. It's the weather. It's South Africa. Anyway, let's see how it goes now. This is 24. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith, and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Here Prabhupada is emphasizing determination, which is pretty much the theme of the verse, And to illustrate this, Prabhupada tells the story of the example of the sparrow. Perhaps you've heard of this before, the example of the sparrow who at the ocean, trying to be clever, tried to steal away the eggs of the sparrow who was somewhere there by the edge of the ocean. And the sparrow wanted her eggs back, but the ocean wouldn't return them. So the sparrow said, "All right, I'll drink you up." But the sparrow was just a sparrow. But she started. But then Garuda, her big brother, big Garuda, who's a type of expansion of the Supreme Lord, he took pity on her. And so then he came and he was going to drink up the ocean, which he could do. And so the ocean gave back the eggs. In other words, if we're determined in Krishna's service, Krishna will help us. The devotees will help us. Help will come, even to surmount. Well, Prabhupada says, at the end remained enthusiastic. So then 25, gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone, and should think of nothing else. Okay. Or the self, the supreme self, too. Yeah. One should, Prabhupada says, one should think of no pleasure aside from the pleasure of the Supreme Self. You know, we already said a number of times how Srila Prabhupada is applying Krishna consciousness to these verses, even though they're often not obviously Krishna conscious. So this was another example of that. All right. So now we come to verses 26 and 27, and they're about a further progression in control of the mind, which of course has been emphasized here and there in different places throughout these few chapters. So 26, from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. And Prabhupada in the purport makes the point, that's the nature of the mind. It's flickering and unsteady. To have a really focused mind, you've got to have a really focused intelligence. So in Krishna consciousness, we do this by engaging the mind and senses in devotional service. Yeah. Prabhupada says, serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. 27. The yogi, whose mind is fixed on me, verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he's freed from all reactions to past deeds. So this is the Brahma Bhuta stage, advanced stage of being fixed on the transcendental platform. So we should, and Prabhupada emphasizes, as usual, or as he has done oftentimes, that we achieve this by always being engaged in devotional service. All right, so now the last section, well, for tonight at least, is, or subsection in fact, verse 28 to verse 32. And it's all about how this advanced yogi sees Krishna everywhere. So I'll just quickly read through the verses and then say some things. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. 30. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. 31. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Supersoul, knowing that I and the Supersoul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. And 32. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. All right, let's just have a look at each verse, because we're going on for an extra 5. From now, we're going to be doing about another 10 minutes or something like that, because we started late, unfortunately, due to the electrical cut. So verse 30. For one who sees me... No, wait a minute. 28. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfection or happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So, always in contact with the Lord. It's called Brahma Samparshaja in the verse itself. Brahma Samparshaja. Yes. So Prabhupada says, this transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Samparshaja. 29. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So, that's interesting in different ways. Yes. One is the emphasis on seeing the Lord. Seeing the Lord. Particularly a super soul. Prabhupada in the purport begins by saying, a Krishna-conscious yogi is the perfect seer because he sees Krishna, the Supreme, situated in everyone's heart as super soul, Paramatma. The Lord in his Paramatma feature is situated within both the heart of the dog and that of the Brahman. So, of course, strictly speaking, this is about Ashtanga Yoga. Although Prabhupada applies the verses and the understanding so often to Krishna consciousness and just pure devotional service. But the fact is that in the classic sense, Ashtanga Yoga brings a person to the point of realizing the super soul in trance, samadhi. realizing the super soul, which then, if the Ashtanga yogi is properly situated, that will lead to them taking up devotional service. Then verse 30, this is more emphatic. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. And it's interesting here that in the Sanskrit, Krishna is using the word me. Yo mam pasyati sarvacha. One who sees me everywhere. Sarvam cha mai pasyati. Who sees everything in me. Tasyaham na pranashyami. Sacha me na pranashyati. He's never lost to me. So this is very Krishna conscious, obviously. This is very Krishna conscious indeed. And Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Sing the Lord everywhere and sing everything in the Lord, which sort of, it's the same thing, more or less. And in the purport, in order to bring out this point very clearly, Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita chapter 5 verse 38, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Valochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Valokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who's always seen by the devotee, whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shamsunda, situated within the heart of the devotee. And as Prabhupada says just immediately after that, at this stage, Lord Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor does the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi, now Prabhupada's going to talk about the Ashtanga yogi. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma within the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself. Yes. Okay, so then on to 31. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Super Soul, knowing that I and the Super Soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Yeah. So like this, that yogi, the Ashtanga yogi, who's been practicing under supervision, probably the same supervision from the beginning of the yoga ladder, like Karmakandya time, right through, and same person or persons teaching him right up to this point. And so those teachers understanding that it's a ladder and you've got to keep going, you don't stop at any particular point on the ladder. So if one has good instruction like that, then if or when the Ashtanga yogi realizes the Super Soul, then they'll come to understand this is Krishna. And then they'll become devotees, engaged in devotional service. And 32, it's more about the yogi. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Well, Srila Prabhupada, applying it in terms of devotees in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada explains that devotees have been through. Who amongst us sitting here listening tonight, who has not been through quite a bit? Oh, Krishna, oh my Lord. So Prabhupada says, first sentence in the purport, one who's Krishna conscious is a perfect yogi. He's aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. Yeah, they're going through what we're going through also. And the devotee understands, why am I distressed? Well, Prabhupada says it's actually towards the end of the purport. He's the best yogi because he doesn't desire perfection in yoga for his personal benefit, but tries for others also. He doesn't envy his fellow living entities. And let us conclude by reading these last couple of sentences. Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who is withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who's trying his best to turn every man towards Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. So we'll carry on tomorrow night from this point, from verse 33 to the end of the chapter, and then that's tomorrow's Wednesday. Then Thursday and Friday we'll have questions and answers. So please send in your questions, but not too many. Maximum one each. Make sure it's an important question. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.